This is Criteria.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Criteria. I'm Thomas Miras, and I'm here with my co-host, James Majewski. Hello, James.
Hey there, Thomas.
We're here following up on our review a couple of episodes back of a new film called Man of God, which was produced in Greece a while back, mostly in the English language, and is now about to receive its U.S. release. It'll be in theaters, select theaters, on March 21st and on March 28th here in the U.S.
I'm starting to think that you're not human.
I can assure you that I'm human, Mr. President.
No, I can assure you that I'm human. I'm the one who dislikes you. Maybe I envy you in a strange way. Although I dislike your ways, your asceticism and everything that comes with it. Quite frankly, I can't stand it. But I see that you have found peace in it. So I must say, that is good.
Do you have peace, Mr. President?
No. No, I do not.
Man of God is a film about the great Greek Orthodox saint, Saint Nektarios of Aegina, and it stars a number of well-known Eastern European actors, Arias Servitalis, Alexander Petrov, and a very famous American actor, Mickey Rourke. And today we'll be talking to the director of the film about the story of Saint Nectarios, the background of the film, and her own story in filmmaking. And so I'm very happy to welcome to the show today the director and writer of Man of God, Yelena Popovic. Welcome to the show, Yelena.
Hello, hi. Thank you for having me.
This is obviously a Roman Catholic show, primarily a Roman Catholic audience, and so James and I were not familiar with Saint Nectarios before watching this film. I did read up on him a little bit afterwards, and that the film does a great job of introducing him. But can you maybe introduce our audience to this saint, who apparently is very, very popular in Greece, but not necessarily so well known in the U.S.?
If you can allow me to say something just as prior to introduction, it's what's interesting. Until 2012, I did not know much about him either. I simply picked up a book and read about him because I heard stories of him. He's a later-day saint. He passed away in 1920. And because of his numerous miracles, especially with terminal diseases, he's very well known to heal cancer and really difficult illnesses. He's become extremely venerated throughout the Orthodox world. And wherever he would actually, not only in Greece, but in Serbia and in Romania. He apparently appeared there a few times. And in Romania, they just, and done a lot of healing. It's quite remarkable saint, I must say, somebody who has passed away that recently. It wasn't that long ago. It's not like Saint Nicholas or Saint Patrick or, like it's it really, and the reason I think why he gained so much popularity, it was because during his earthly life, people knew he was a saint. Because of his love for people, he was very much loved by people. He was somebody who would sacrifice completely for others. I mean, and selflessly. And as you know in the film, he wasn't unfortunately liked by his superiors, people that maybe, as we know in every religion, it doesn't matter, it's Orthodox, Catholic, or Protestant, or, we have people that they don't really live by what they preach, and he was one of those that really loved the Lord and he had a Christ-like life, and that bothered some of the superiors because they were not there. They were there to lead, but also there were, I think, unfortunately, it happens to a lot of people in power. They get in a higher positions, and they forget why they're there in the first place, and they start liking power and money more than the Lord. And he was a thorn in the side to those, and he was going to actually even become a patriarch in Alexandria, and they just simply didn't want that to happen. So they invented a lot of different slander and things that were not true, and they exiled him from Egypt. Basically, he never was able to regain a position of a bishop. He never served again as a bishop until the rest of his life, but he nevertheless continued doing what he liked the most, which is preaching the good word and helping the poor and healing those that were in need. So that's Saint Nectarios.
Obviously we've just heard his life story is quite remarkable, and what I think is, especially great about this film that you've made here is that all of that is able to be articulated. I mean, right from the beginning, for me as an audience, not knowing anything about Saint Nectarios, it's already very clear to me, okay, this is a well-beloved member of the clergy, loved by the people, not liked by those in power. The film uses a kind of shorthand right from the beginning to get across this information that otherwise, I think that another film might have gotten caught up in the politics or the sort of background information of what's going on in this man's life. Obviously, this is present throughout the film and it tells that story, but the focus definitely remains very much on the sanctity of this man and on the relationships that he has with other people in his life, and the kind of the larger political squabbling begins to kind of recede into the background, only to make itself felt in these moments of these really great dramatic moments of persecution or of slander. So I wanted to ask you about why make a film about Saint Nectarios today? Obviously, there's a lot that is perennially of interest in any of the saints. There are values that are universally applicable, but I wanted to ask you, what about this man and his life did you feel was particularly salient for speaking about today?
Okay, since we have a little bit of time, I can elaborate on it, right? So I can, so audience can understand better.
Absolutely.
Maybe even who am I and where I come from. I grew up in Belgrade. At the time, it was Yugoslavia. Now it's Serbia. We had a war, so to say, and that broke up the country. And I left. I was 16 and a half, 17. You see, I was somebody in my family. People didn't talk about the church, about God. Even though their parents were baptized, but at the time of communism and the time Yugoslavia was still affected by that. Going to church was not in. And like my mom was a teacher, so I remember clearly that my grandmother would say, "Well, you should baptize your daughter." And they always shied away. She always shied away from that. Maybe because feeling that she might be questioned or people would look down on her. That's the vibe that it was back then in Yugoslavia, in the whole of Yugoslavia, regardless whether you were in Croatia or in Serbia. That was the general feeling. So, but I remember, and I don't know why and how. I don't remember anybody telling me about God. But I always had faith in God. I always felt that there was somebody there, that was greater than me, that I could communicate with, that protects me in situations. And I had that very strong connection with that unknown, with the Creator, since I was very little. All I can remember is that maybe there were a few people that sometimes will touch upon that subject, and I would immediately tune in, because I already had that connection, but I don't remember anybody telling me about it. So I remember as I was growing up, I would go to churches. Because churches back there, it's like in, they're open during the day. You can go in, and I would go and do a prayer. I always felt this is the home of God, that this is where I can communicate with him, and I can. So when I left, when I was 17 and a half, as the war was starting, I remember distinctly, I went to the church dedicated to Saint Mark, the apostle, and in Belgrade, in the center of Belgrade, and I walked in, and I remember where I was standing, and I asked God to protect me and take care of me now that I'm leaving my family and my homeland, because it's a war. I want to have a better life. I feel like I have to go and do something else somewhere else. And I've asked him to protect me. When I was in Italy, I would often go to the Catholic churches. And for me, at that point, I did not know who Jesus was, who Holy Virgin Mary was. I just knew these were churches, these were homes of God. So I would go to a Catholic church in Piazza Duomo, I remember, in Milan, and I would go there with all these people, and they were all kneeling down praying, and that's often where I would go and do a prayer. And I always felt in these moments where I was by myself. I didn't have anybody. My parents were not able to support me. I had to work, and I went to work as a model, and I had to do other things too if I didn't have enough money. But I would always turn to him, and that's why I was spending a lot of time in the church. Later on, I got visa finally to come to the United States. I wasn't able originally to go straight from Belgrade because the American embassy was shut down in Belgrade because of the war that was breaking out. So I had to go through Italy.
Yeah, my family was actually in Belgrade at the time.
Serious?
My father is a diplomat, and he was working at the embassy. Yeah, and my family was evacuated out of Belgrade when the embassy was shut down.
So you understand. So I had to go through Italy. I got my work permit, and I got one entrance visa for United States. And believe me, I prayed about this. I prayed about this. So I basically went and got in. I remember my entrance was through Miami, and then I made it to New York City, where I ended up working for Elite Modeling Agency. And where did I stay? I stayed in first some modeling apartments. Eventually, I got my own apartment, small studio on 34th and Park. And what did I do? I walked every single day to St. Patrick's Cathedral for 1 year. And I went in the back where the statue of Virgin Mary, again, not knowing, like this is very interesting, And then there was a statue on the left of Archangel Michael. And I've developed I don't know, I can't explain this, but I went there literally every day. I was there praying and praying to Archangel Michael, even to a point where I felt I really had a strong connection. My older son, I named him Michael. I promised him if I have a son, I'm going to call him Michael. And I called my older son, who's going to turn 22.
That's wonderful.
Michael. And later, when I was 21, I was in Los Angeles at this point. I'm like, okay, I got to get baptized. So I go to Serbian. I'm from Serbia. That was the mere reason. I went to the Serbian church in Alhambra. Church dedicated to a saint from Serbia, Saint Sava, and I got baptized, but not until I was 25, when my first son was born, did I remember a friend of mine, because I really fell in love with Jesus, with Christ. I read the Bible, and I would often, like being a model and hanging out in like art crowd. I remember many times I would preach about this, and I would tell them, and they were like, under influence, some of them. I'm not, when I say this, I don't judge anybody. I personally did not have need for that. I was somebody who just simply wasn't attracted to drinking or doing anything. That's who I was. Maybe there was some protection there. Who knows? If I did, maybe I wouldn't be here today, but I simply didn't. But a lot of my friends were. It didn't bother me. They were doing their art. They were trying to feel better. Ultimately, maybe that's some kind of search for God, because ultimately we all search peace and serenity. It's just the wrong way to go. But, so I remember I was telling them many times that every time I got a chance, I'm like, listen, you got to get off that. You should turn to God. And this was kind of interesting, because they were all looking at me like, what is this girl talking about? So that was my little mission. And because I felt really close in my heart to the Lord. And at one point I found out who he was. I read the Bible and all that. So at 25, there was one girl, a friend of mine, who didn't believe in anything. And I remember at the time her and her husband were telling me, come on, Yelena, you and your stories. And I just I didn't try to bother anybody, but I just felt like if somebody was in need or they were really, I could see they're not going to end well, I was trying to share something with them and hopefully help them out. So she calls me when my son was born. We run into each other. And then she says, Yelena, you know how you were talking about God? Do you go to church? Do you take communion? Do you go for confession? And now I was baptized, but again, I didn't know the church, the mysteries of the church. I wasn't introduced in that. So I'm like, no, but I'm doing my own thing. But, and she talked to me and I listened to her. And I said, okay, I'm going to hear what you have to say. I'm going to go back to my father who baptized me and I'm going to do the confession and I'm going to take, hopefully, communion. I'm going to partake of the mysteries. So I went back. I remember till today, I was by myself in the church. As you can imagine, you have your first confession, at least me. I wasn't living by the church rules. I had to unload a lot of stuff. I was like doing everything. And then the priest told me, okay, fast for a week. He had certain instructions for me. And he told me next week, come and take a Holy Communion. So I did that. I came back the next week. And I partook of the Eucharist, of the mysteries, and I've experienced something. I'm not joking. I was laughing and crying for about 6 to 7 hours after that. And I did not know what it was. And I was like, this is really, I was super happy. Like I never experienced that happiness in my heart. When you experience something like that, and I remember coming home and calling my friend Meredith, and I'm laughing and crying. She says, oh, Yelena has gotten drunk for the first time. I said, no, Yelena hasn't gotten drunk for the first time. Something else has happened here, and clearly, if you have that kind of physical experience of grace, which is obviously what it was, I knew that I had to I never turned back after that. I started going regularly to the services, to the mass, and I got on the path of spiritual battle, because once it's not easy. I don't know, even for it's the same thing happens to anybody who gets on that path. You don't get out from your passions, from the things that you used to do that easily. And sometimes when you decide to go on that path, it intensifies on top of everything. And I thought at one point, like, I'm like, I knew I wasn't a good, I had a lot of issues, but this was like intense. And then my priest, that's where he helped me. He said, this is just because you're getting on the path that you haven't been before. And thanks to, I must say, Holy Virgin Mary, who I pray to regularly, Archangel Michael, all the saints, and obviously our Lord, I managed after a few, to stick. And I think through that fight and through that fire, we grow, we get closer. So to cut the story short, now this one, why is it coming to this? I read a lot of books on saints as I was, when you're beginning in your life of the church. I was very enthusiastic. I read the different holy fathers, old ones, latter ones, and I always enjoyed that, because clearly they always, like, as you say, the stories are universal. They give you strength and hope, and you see how these men and women have struggled and through their life, and how humble and loving they were, and some of them were martyred for their faith. And but not until my father had passed away, whom I haven't seen in 10 years, because I was an immigrant and I didn't get my citizenship for a while. It took me 18 years to get a green card and citizenship, and it can get complicated sometimes. And mine was mostly because of an error. It was a filing that it didn't arrive on time or something, and then I ended up in immigration court, and it was just, and I already had 2 kids, and of course, when my father had passed away, I couldn't just leave the country and never come back. I couldn't go for his funeral. And now to make this parallel, my father was somebody who was, even though he did not go to church, but he was extremely righteous, holy, very, very honorable guy. He was one of the best civil engineers in the country. And because he was very ethical and living at the time when, people, especially with that regime, people, when you get in a high position, they like to do things to make money. They don't care about simple people. Well, he was loved by his workers. and he did not want to cheat and steal to gain more money and more property. So he was thorn in the side to others, and they brought 6 false witnesses to the court, and they got him down from his position.
Wow.
So I've lived with this. I heard many times, my mom and everybody, he shouldn't have done that. How, I mean, he could have gained so much, material stuff. But I always had respect for him, for the fact that he stuck to his principles, and he left a huge imprint on me. So when I think between going there after 10 years of not seeing him for 10 years, he's no longer with me, and kind of like I didn't know how I was going to feel to walk into an apartment where I grew up, and he was there, and I interestingly enough, I felt peace. I didn't feel disturbed, because. And I went to the monastery nearby for mass, because I wanted to keep myself sane in my head in that situation. And that's where I saw a book about Saint Nectarios. Now I heard about him again, but I didn't know much about him. So I said, great, I'm going to buy this book, and I'm going to take it, and I'm going to read it on the way back to Los Angeles. And when I read the book about Saint Nectarios, probably between my own experience, between my father's experience, there was something so personal about this story. There was something so, it was as it spoke to me on such personal level that I was just so blown away, like it was written in my soul or something. And I knew, and I was already, I wrote a couple of scripts before. I was going to Playhouse West training for actors and directors, and I knew the craft. I mean, I've learned they really teach you well the craft, whether you want to act or direct or write. And I thought that this story, and being somebody, by the way, faith has played a huge part in my life. It has pulled me out. It has made me live, made me move forward, made me overcome obstacles, pain, and everything. So many times I hear, and I'm sure you run into this a lot as well, younger people say, well, I don't want to go there. I see sometimes they do things in the church. There are people in the church that are doing things that they're not good.
Right.
And I would try to tell them, okay, there are no angels in the church like there are no angels in real life, but I have personally experienced something incredible. And it's a shame that you are paying attention to, yes, it is wrong. And that's something that should be addressed, I think, but it's not the point. The point is our relationship with God and the mysteries that we get in the church, and we should focus on ourselves. So this story, because he had all these elements that I needed to kind of channel that grace from this incredible man who was prosecuted by his superiors in the church, and still focus, as you say, my main focus was to show how he struggled, how he responded to it, and that he never left the church, and he ultimately became victorious at the end and became a saint. I mean, we can only say that maybe if he didn't go through such a struggle, maybe he wouldn't have been a saint. And this is what's and I need to share just one more little thing regarding him, that there is a point to what I'm saying. In 1961, when he was canonized, after thousands of miracles that happened, there was a rift in the clergy and in Mount Athos, where the monks live, and they have whether he should be canonized or not. Some people were like, "Oh no, he shouldn't. He wrote books, but there wasn't on a level," and how people are. But people always knew he was a saint. And then there were other ones saying, "Come on, he's done so many miracles. He's obviously a holy man." So there was such a rift. There was almost like an argument and a fight on Mount Athos, that they decided to choose 3 abbots, the leaders of the monastery. There are different monasteries there, male monasteries. So they decided, I don't know which 3, but there were 3 igumanos, the leaders, and they decided to fast and pray for 3 days to see what kind of message they would get. So he appeared to each one of them, and he told them the same story. Wow. And this is what he told them. He says, "Yes, you're right. Maybe I wasn't the greatest ascetic like Saint Anthony the Great, or people that from, or Saint Syrian, or people that we all equally celebrate, that they were in the desert and they ate only one olive and prayed. It says, or maybe I wasn't such an amazing theologian like Saint Augustine, or maybe there are people that were better theologians than me, but I was prosecuted unjustly and slandered, and that's why I'm a saint. So this is a very interesting, and I endured it with love, and I never responded, and that's why I am. And that's when the ultimate, they said, okay, they canonized him. And so this film really obviously talks a lot about this, about the lust for power, and what happens to, it can happen anywhere. It can happen in any sphere. Just it happens to happen in the church, and I was trying to be honest, to make a human film that people can relate to, not to think so much of spirituality, even though that's something very important to me. It's ingrained in my life. I feel I carry it with me, but I was trying to make a good movie about this man and give a value to a film. So it's not just propaganda or something like that, which then it doesn't really affect people.
Right. Yeah, thank you for speaking at such length about that. I had this whole list of questions in front of me about your background and your time in LA, and I just feel like, oh, great, we hit all of that. But maybe there's more we can talk about there. But I just want to say that I just wanted to say that for me watching this film, I definitely thought about how today. There seems to be such a prejudice for action or for speaking out or for agitation. I think that, certainly in the United States, things are just so politicized. But I think that around the world, we live in very chaotic times. And whether it's through the news or social media or whatever, people are bombarded with information. There's always scandals, there's always stories, there's always arguments, and then you feel compelled to do something about it, to speak out, to protest. And listen, I'm not slighting the need for legitimate engagement and the struggle for justice and doing good in the world. But what was the biggest takeaway for me in watching this film and learning about Saint Nectarios is the value of silence, of suffering, of obedience, which is something that we really don't like to talk about. Even within the church, obedience can sometimes be a bit of a taboo subject. I think it's very challenging, especially for Americans, who kind of pride ourselves on the American Revolution, and casting off the chains of authority. And so anyway, for me, this everything that you're saying very much rings true with what I got out of the film and what I got out of becoming acquainted with this incredible saint.
Yeah, I was going to say too that what moved me most about the film was his relationship with his patriarch, which is amazing because you never actually see the two of them together, and the fact that you were talking, Yelena, about not rejecting God or the church or the mysteries of the church because of bad people in the church. But not only did he not do that, but he didn't even reject the visible authorities of the church. He didn't rebel. He didn't disrespect them. He continued to love his patriarch as a father. And that's what makes the film all the more poignant. It's when you finally have that scene at the tomb of the patriarch where he finally just lets loose his sorrows and his grievances. And it's that, for me, that was the most moving scene in the film because of that.
Thank you for saying that. You see, a lot of these things, I must say something that when you, as a creator or a filmmaker or an artist, you got to put yourself into into what you're doing if you want people to feel it. And I have personally experienced something, don't have to get into details, but something that I've never received a phone call, from somebody that I cared about so much. And he was also a spiritual father. It was very difficult for me. It's interestingly enough, when I thought of this and when I wrote it, I ironically looked up and said, do you really want me to put myself into this? Because there were parallels there, why me? Because I knew there was something interesting here, how things were developing. So then I knew my responsibility was to really put things that I understand, that I relate to, that I feel. And that's one of the scenes that was done with, and I thought, because no matter how, yes, he's a holy man, he's a saint, but he's human as well. And he will hurt, he will have pain. He chooses, saints, it's not like they don't have anger or don't have feelings. They simply choose the higher route. They choose not to react in certain ways. They practice that. So he would be naturally extremely, this is my son walking by, he would be actually extremely, he would go through a lot of pain. And I focused on that he really went through a lot of pain, that it bothered him, that he never heard from this man who used to call him his son and who he considered the father. So naturally, at one point, he decided to leave. He had a chance to even become a patriarch. There were people that were on his side, but he didn't want to go against him. He didn't want to scandalize anybody. And somewhere after all these years of never hearing from him, not even a word, and he dies, he had to have a moment where he would let him know in a human way how unfair that, call him on it, and this was, I think, a good place to do it.
Yeah.
And I think part of the reason that he really, not only that he didn't care about becoming the patriarch, but in my own mind, imagine if a patriarch had let you down to such a degree, right? If you don't allow that to make you bitter and miserable, but you still cling to Jesus and kind of go through the pain with dignity, you would not want to become a patriarch. So that's why in some interesting way, he says at the end, the justice will prevail. I will not become a patriarch, because he did not want to be that. He didn't want to risk of going to that, who knows, when you're in power, and that's what he would protect himself. Yes.
Yeah, I thought that line, I was very struck by that line. And it's the last line of that section, and you're kind of stuck pondering it as he's sailing away, and you see the votes being cast. And but I had meant to ask you this question because not only did you direct this film, but you also wrote it. And I wanted to ask about what that process was like for you, about how you went about writing a screenplay about a saint to whom you were introduced in 2012. Were there many primary sources you checked out, or did you work with any consultants or anything like that?
Initially, I read about him. There was one book I read. Then after I read that book, I was like thinking about this, as I said, and I was really moved. Like, I thought this has to be a movie, and so I felt, if it's God's will, obviously. I mean, I wasn't in a position to just, bring the money and make the film. So clearly, and I need to mention this, I was very patient in this process to see if this is really meant to be. Can I really do this? Because it's a huge responsibility. It's not just a film about anybody, and but I had this burning desire to do this. So what I did, I read that one book, then many other books. I listened to a lot of talks about him. I've done a lot of research. Then I was reading his own writings, because he wrote a lot. So that's where I was able to get better feel of who he really was, especially in his letters. There are about 136 letters. existing that he wrote to the nuns in the monastery. And the first year, I just pretty much, when you're making a film, you have to decide what kind of film you're making. I mean, you can make 20 films about Saint Nectarios, but I had to kind of narrow down and decide what is this film that I'm making. And one of the main premises was that the lust for power, unhealthy lust for power, and that really can destroy human soul, and it can get you off the path of spirituality. And this was one of the main, so that's why I chose to make the film from his exile until the end of his life, where you see all that struggle and all that injustice. So as I was working out through the outline, through treatment, which is the most important part of writing the script, ultimately you have to find out what is this that story you're telling. I remember I went to Greece for the first time in my life in 2013. My husband is half Greek, so I had an opportunity to go there with him. And it was summer, and I took those 2 pieces of paper to the monastery in Aegina. It's right next to Athens. It's an hour boat ride from Athens. And I went and venerated the place where he was buried, his holy relics. And I put that piece of paper, I remember in my own way, I asked him, I said, if this is your will, if it's God's will, I would like to do this to the glory of God and salvation of men. That's my main objective here.
Wow.
Please help me to not only make it happen, but guide me to what is this that you want, how shall I develop this? You know, I have an idea, but obviously I would like to do a really something special here, something that's worthy of him, you know. So I came back the next year with a script. I went to the same place. Now I have a script and I'm putting it on his tomb, and I'm going through the same process, you know, like asking, okay, now I have a script and it's looking like it's getting somewhere. And I did that one more time. So that happened 3 times. So that's like 2013, 14, 15. In 2015, as I had different drafts and I was able to read more things and talk to more people, I decided to go to the monastery where I would frequently visit in Arizona. It's a monastery of St. Anthony the Great, because it's a Greek Orthodox monastery, and naturally with something like this, you have to get a blessing from somebody, you know, so I went and spoke to the elder there, and I told him, I brought a script, and I told him I would like to make a movie about St. Nectarios. I wrote the script. This is the script. You can read it. And what's interesting, I used to go for 15 years. I would go there maybe twice a year. I would drive from Los Angeles to Phoenix, and it's off Phoenix in Florence. That's where that monastery is. And but I never knew. I always thought the main church is dedicated to Saint Anthony the Great. And they say, you know, that the main church is dedicated to Saint Nectarios. And I was like, really? You know, I you know, this is now me not knowing the details of because I go there to pray, and so I cannot see where is which icon, and you know, to figure out. It doesn't say on the church. So I said, oh, that's kind of interesting, you know. So they said, you have our blessing, and this was a very holy person. He passed away now. His name was Father Ephraim. He says, you have our blessing, but one thing we want to ask you, that whoever plays the lead, it should be a believer. Whoever plays it. That's the only thing we're going to ask you to do, is to cast somebody in a main role, and the rest, if it's God's will, it's going to happen. That's how they speak. They don't speak very much. Wow. So now my idea was to stay in the U.S. I never thought of moving to Europe. I thought I was going to stay in the U.S. and then I'm going to develop it from the U.S. and then obviously to film it in Greece, because that's the best thing. You know, the atmosphere is very important. That's where he lived and that's where he preached. But life is interesting. My older son ended up moving to Serbia to play tennis. He was top 10 tennis player in the U.S. The guy that just walked in and out now, he's not playing tennis anymore. He's going to graduate from college. And the younger one was with me, and my husband, who had a very good job at a production house, I'm Global, he decided to leave that and go to Greece to see his mother and do something there. And I'm by myself now in LA with Nikolai, who's 5 years old. And I say, well, everybody's somewhere. Maybe we should relocate to Europe temporarily. There's an importance to what I'm saying, because now it ties into the film. I thought, okay, my older son was with my mom for 3 months. He doesn't want to, he likes it there. He's in home study. I can't just leave him with my mom. I have to go and help him. Okay, she helped for 3 months, but at one point I decide, and then what do? I drive. I get at 2 a.m. again to go back to the monastery to ask, because this is a big decision, and I have to ask, what am I supposed to relocate to Europe? And I remember them looking at me like, we can't tell you that. I'm like, no, you're gonna have to tell me something, because this is a very serious situation here. I'm like, I have a feeling, and I'm not talking about the movie now. Movie's not even in my head. I'm just talking in general. So towards my end of my stay, the elder says, okay, I think you should relocate. Okay. I come back and I tell my husband it's fine. He's been telling me I should come to Greece. So let's relocate to Europe for time being. End of December 2015, beginning of 2016, I'm in Belgrade. And I think, oh, this is going to be fantastic. Now everybody's together. My older son is very happy, and the little one. And to cut the story short, a few months later, my older son, who was 15, turning 16, and now I made this move to help him out and everything. And he's from my first marriage. It was a relationship when I was very young, when I wasn't going really. I told you when he was born, that's when I started to seriously go to church. He decides, and I've been through courts left and right. I mean, it was a difficult situation. So in a way, I felt, okay, he's here. I have no problem with his dad. We have a good relationship. But I'm thinking, so there's no more courts. There's no more. Maybe I can even make him legal at 16, so we don't have to see a courtroom ever again. It was something very, very difficult in my life. So he decides, he's turning 16, and he says, Mom, this tennis story, I gave it all, which is fine, I want to go back to US and I want to stay with my dad. And I'm like, okay. And he says, I know you're going to see this as a betrayal after everything that we've been through, but I really feel that I have to. What was I going to say? He's turning 16. He wants to see his dad. You see, I had a sole custody. I'm not one of these people who likes to take people away. I can say I have a heart I can't do that. I cannot say you can't go see your dad. I would never do that. So they say bite the dust, and I say, okay, this is what you want to do, go. And somehow in that period, my husband, who raised him since he was 6 years old, he was so upset. He didn't want to see him. He didn't want to speak to him for it was a little bit of a mess. I found myself in a very difficult, painful situation, thinking, what did I do? Did I just leave US? I'm like, am I crazy? I tried to do this for my kids, and what? So what I do in June of 2016, I just crawl, literally go down to Greece just to go and swim and clear my head to decide, what do I need to do? Do I go back to US? Do we stay? So and when I was in Greece, we were staying at my husband's mom's place close to the beach. I was in so much pain that I had to walk to the next door church. I always have to walk to some church to pray. This is unbelievable. I'm going to the next door church. It's open, and I'm there. I'm not joking. I had to pray. I remember it took about 40 to 50 minutes of intense prayer, reading Psalms, and till where I would feel that I would lift myself to a point where I can go home and not show that I was like brokenhearted, destroyed, so I can go through the day. And in this agony, in this crazy, I'm thinking, I made a mistake. Well, I got a blessing, but why would I even go get a blessing? How you go through in your mind going like, what did I do? And why after 20 years in LA, nothing can go right. Now I'm here. So the thought comes to my mind, am I here to make a film about Saint Nectarios? Like this is like, this diseased actress director from LA, is not giving up on like possibility of making a movie. This is what's incredible. So I'm like, maybe this is what it is. And I start reaching out. Now, when I was in Greece, I was able to meet people that were very close, that knew of him very well. priests that I became really close to. They were praying for me. I went to the monastery. The main nun was on my side. So I got closer now spiritually to the whole realm of Saint Nectarios. And I started learning more about him, not only from the books, but from being there. So now if I wasn't there going through what I was going through, I don't think this film would have turned out the way it did. So slowly, funny enough, we start meeting people in Greece, and everyone we met, they say, yeah, let's do this. And you know, when you live in Los Angeles, how many times, okay, I did one film, I directed, I wrote, and I acted in it. We won some film festivals, but it was a very small, you know, one camera, shoestring budget film. Like, this is a more serious production. It's a period piece. So now everyone's getting on board. And I'm like, you know, is this even, like, how in life you never know? I mean, why you're supposed to go somewhere and why, and it usually happens with a lot of doubt. It doesn't go smoothly, but if you're willing, I think, to kind of stick around, maybe you can figure out, you know, that's what happened to me. So I start working on it. We applied for, there was another actor who was attached to play the lead at that point. It was quite well-known international actor who is from ex-Yugoslavia. And we had him. The script was there. It was pretty much in order at that point. I mean, even though after I rewrote it again before I filmed it, but it's normal, you know, as a screenwriter and a director, you fix things as you go along, depending on director of photography and all that. So now we're going to this was supposed to be a co-production of Greece, Serbia, and Croatia. And Greek Film Center was supposed to be the main producer. But because the theme of the movie has a religious subject, they declined, even though we had all the boxes, like we had part of the financing, we had a great actor, like our film had way more than any other film going in there. But because of this, number one producer in Greece and everything, they declined because you see, that's what we are talking about now. There is a lot of resistance out there everywhere. When people ask me, well, how did you make a film about the saint? I said, listen, making a film, independent film, is difficult. But if you're going to make a film about saint, you definitely need God's help. You know, this is a reality. You know, so we find ourselves, okay, how are we going to get the money for this? And something incredible happens. A friend of mine was going to the Mount Athos, to the monasteries, and all of a sudden I receive a phone call from a monk from Mount Athos, going, Miss Popovic, you know, we heard you're making a film about Saint Nectarios. And I said, yes, Father, I am. He says, could you meet with us? We have a documentary we made in Athens. We're going to show it about our elder who passed away. We would like to meet with you. I said, of course I would meet with you. So I go to Athens. I meet Father Adrianos, was the name of the monk. He's a wonderful human being. So I watched their documentary, and they said, listen, we'll help you. We'll do anything we can to help you to make your film. And I say, okay. So then I meet the elder of the monastery. For whatever reason, the elder, even though they had other projects going on, he prays about this, and he says, this film has to happen. And all of a sudden, to cut the story short, it wasn't easy. It wasn't like they handed me the money. No. He prayed, and he found investors, like about 3-4 main investors. They were able to give the money to start the film going. And this whole thing, I'm telling you, then the pandemic happened. Everything about this was like miraculous. I mean, there were more miracles while making this film than what I decided to put on the screen. And I say this and this added value, because of the Fathom events, they asked me to shoot 10 minutes of added value behind the scenes. And I will share this with you guys because of your audience. I'm sharing an incredible miracle of Archangel Michael that happened during the filming. So I'm not going to give it out, but if people go see the film, they'll be able to hear that.
Okay.
So that's it's really, I mean, I would be like, a lot of people would say, well, you say God helped you, Saint Nectarios. I said, yes, he did, you know, because I wouldn't be able to do this without the help from above. I mean, I'm aware of this, and I have to give glory to God for this.
this was a Greek production, but you decided to make the film in English. Yes. Is that something that's common in Greece or in that part of the world to make a film for release there, as well as in other places that's in sort of another language?
Well, what happened was I always felt that the story is very universal, and that the story will speak to different people, different denominations, maybe even people that don't have any faith. As a matter of fact, I think this, I've seen people that are not religious that watched this and they were very moved. So that was my goal, is to reach different people. And in my discussion with the investors, they agreed with it. So that's why we did film in English, and we needed to get a couple of maybe different actors from different countries that had some kind of recognition in order to be able to roll out the film internationally. So for a few different reasons, we decided to do it in English with accents. I don't think this would be realistic to do it in an American accent, because you're in Greece. It's like Franco Zeffirelli's Jesus of Nazareth. Yeah. You have to have accents if it makes you believe more that you're in a different country, in a different place. So you either have to do it in Greek or English with accent. So that was our choice for those reasons I mentioned. And I'm very happy. The film just came out in France. It's a Roman Catholic distributor, and they loved the film, and we got amazing reviews. And yesterday in Champs-Élysées, there was a line of people waiting to see the movie. So I'm very happy about it.
So I understand that the film has done well at in religious settings, like you just mentioned. You told us before we started recording that the film was at the New Religion Film Festival in Trento, Italy, yes. And that a Vatican representative awarded the film as the best faith film of the year, yes. For example. But I wanted to know, in Greece, was this a mainstream theatrical release?
It was a mainstream theatrical release. At the beginning, this was very odd, because there were people from I always say we're right, left. I don't even know what it is anymore nowadays. We're so divided, but let's say left. People from the side that they didn't want to see a religious film coming out. They were saying, oh, this is just only grandmothers with grandchildren will see this. It's like one of those boring religious movies. Well, you know what? As I expressed here, I wasn't even trying to make a religious movie. I tried to make a meaningful film, and I just kind of ignored that. I knew if people give it a chance, they would see it. Well, it turned out that majority of people were young that went to see the film. Some of them did not even have faith, and they saw it multiple times. They called it a phenomenon at the end, because it was number one on box office for like 6 weeks consecutive. You had like Black Widow, James Bond, nothing could beat this. It was a huge, phenomenal success. Wow. And even people, like even atheists, were writing saying, whatever they wrote about this, it's not true. I recommend this to everybody, and that's what I did. I specifically made it where I can speak to people, because all of us, we want peace, we want love, we want to find a way in this life, right? I mean, for somebody to say that you don't need films and people to try to prevent films like this to come out, they're diluted. They're making a huge mistake, because unfortunately nowadays, after so much darkness that the industry has been saturated with, because I believe now we have a lot of darkness around us. So we don't need to go to a movie now to experience darkness. So I think now is the right time for people to see something that's going to help them, that has the potential of healing them. And I think that this film, I'm not talking as a director now, I'm talking from various experiences of people that have expressed this to me. For example, the lady called Sun Critique in France, that's a mainstream magazine. It's not a religious magazine. She did a review on the film, and she did a very nice review. I'm grateful for that. But then she sent me a personal email, and she said, I need to share something with you. I lost my husband a year ago. And this is not somebody who goes to church who is religious. She's, I'm sure, Roman Catholic, French, but she's not a church-going person. So she said, I lost my husband a year ago, and thanks to my daughter, who we had, I managed to survive such loss and pain. And when I went to see your film, I still had a lot of pain, and it was very hard for me. But after seeing your movie, I have to tell you that I feel more peaceful, and I'm gaining back my faith in God. So just even this one person, and this was my main thing. I wanted to share this with people. I wanted to help people to help them get through this life, to understand that there is more. Yes, we have a lot of suffering. We have a lot of things that don't make sense. We cannot answer, a lot of questions. We cannot understand everything, but we have to help each other and give hope. And I think films that give you hope are important, or any kind of art, whether it's music or theater, especially nowadays. I think we really need it, and young people need it. Middle-aged people need it. It doesn't matter who it is. We need. That's what I feel. Could be wrong, but I think it's something that it's important, especially nowadays when we are so divided. And you mentioned about humility being nowhere in sight, and this is the reason I think that we became so divided. That because everybody, if you look at the news or the way we are raised right now, we are taught to just blame everybody else for our problems. I mean, if you turn the TV on, I don't care from which side you're on. I'm just talking in general. Like, it's always other person's fault. It's always the other person is terrible. And we've gotten to a point where we allow ourselves now to say, well, if I'm right, I can even hurt this person. Do you see what I'm saying? We've gotten to on a dangerous level of hatred where things can blow out of proportion, and we can end up getting humbled in a way that happened in my country when I left, which is not something I would like to see happen. So I think examples of humility and self-sacrifice and love and self-examination are actually important right now.
Well, you had mentioned when you were speaking about this blessing that you received to make the film, you had mentioned this stipulation about the leading actor, and I wanted to ask you about Aris Sarvatalis because his performance is obviously just huge in this film. You've got a wonderful cast, not the least of which is our own Mickey Rourke, a favorite actor of mine. The man that you have playing Saint Nectarios, he's just so I mean, the film either succeeds or fails on whoever it is playing this man, right? I mean, you could have a great supporting ensemble, and if whoever's playing Saint Nectarios isn't up to snuff, then it's just game over. So I wanted to ask about just the process of how you got to work with Aris, and what working with him was like, and maybe also speak to how you directed this performance, or what you were looking for in this performance. The performance that he gives to Saint Nectarios is very contrasted with the performances elsewhere throughout the film. There's a lot of big emotion from different characters. There's really dramatic moments of explosions and anger and distress. But with the character of Nectarios, there's this real sort of subdued and muted performance that doesn't lack emotion for all of that, but is definitely very much exists as a contrast. So that's enough of me talking. I want to ask you about working with Aris and all of that.
Yeah, I was very fortunate to have met him. I was introduced to him by the same fathers from the monastery. I met him in Patra in another screening, and even though somebody else was attached at the time, he was willing to play any role in the movie. What's interesting about Aris, he's probably the best actor of his generation in Greece, and right now, and everybody knows that. He's an incredible actor. But he didn't used to be a believer. On the contrary, he used to be completely on the other side of the fence. He didn't have, he just was an atheist. He didn't care about God. He didn't do it. And all of a sudden, it looks like his wife maybe influenced him a little bit, but it's not just his wife. He had experienced something at some point in his life, and he made this huge turn, 360. And he even has resume where it says my resume before I met Jesus Christ and resume after I met Jesus Christ. This is
Wow,
serious
that's
stuff.
awesome.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
so he basically
Wow.
still continues to do stuff, do a lot of theater. He's incredible at what he does, but he spends a lot of time in prayer at the monasteries. So when I met him a couple of more times, I noticed that he has an aura to play this character. And what was very important to me, especially in this film, and you mentioned that yourself, you noticed there's a certain style that I chose for this, was that I spoke to all of my actors, including Ari's, that I wanted performances that it's not so much about what they're saying, but what they're doing in the scene, which will require to have more of a constrained emotion, especially for the lead character, than to show so much, but to really feel it and to be so honest. Honesty was very important here, because only through that honesty you can feel what the actor is feeling. So, and we decided, apart from only one scene, which was the priests at the beginning that betrayed him, I had to see them together. I had to see them sitting and just reading lines for 5 seconds. We had no rehearsals whatsoever. I spoke with every actor separately, and because I'm very good at that, that's my forte. I studied in a really good school, and I know very well how to communicate with actors. I was able to basically inspire them, and we were able to talk about their role and what it meant to them, and what is this they were doing in the scene. This was very important. So they were all very clear, and they were happy in doing it. So once they were, and there was a lot of conflict in those relationships. So once they were on the set, it worked. We didn't have to reshoot one scene in the whole film. But I must say, if there's something that I'm good at directing actors. You know, that's something I feel really comfortable with. And what's interesting is that even Mickey Rourke enjoyed working with me, which he's very difficult, in a way to like a director, especially. He can be very, very tough, but he really he came and he gave it all. I mean, it was incredible what he did. You know, he really, really did this. One of the reasons he accepted the role was because it was about a saint and about the suffering, because Mickey Rourke is actually very devout. Even though it's interesting, I can even share something with you later. I have some footage of him where he talks about it, about his faith, and you'll be amazed to hear that he does rosary 3 times a day, that he prays, that he's struggling with his demons and trying to get better. He's somebody who understands this material very well, and that was one of the reasons he actually wanted to do it, and I'm very grateful that he did it. So, but again, the most important thing for me as an actor, and this is I'm kind of influenced, but I love John Huston as a director, apart from other film directors. And John Huston used to say that he does his directing in a casting room. So, importance of casting the right actors is huge, especially if you're going to do a little bit of more of a stylized kind of picture. So they have to be very much, you have to believe they are who they are without saying a word. And this was one of the most important elements in directing and making this film. I was very careful. It took me a while to choose. I don't care if they had one line or one scene. Everybody had to be believable, and they had to be very clear on what they were doing. And we decided, my director of photography, who was fabulous. This guy has done only one movie before. And I saw his film, and I was blown away. And I was wondering, how come you only did one film? It's interesting, but him and I really understood each other. And this is something interesting, I think, for your viewers, that before we met, when people would ask me, "What is this going to look like? Can you show us pictures?" And I'm like, "Listen, I work from inside out, so I will show you once I get into it, because I have a different approach to filmmaking. I don't work from outside in. I work from inside out." And this, And I would just tell them, I said, well, this is like a cross between Jesus of Nazareth, Franco Zeffirellis, and Coen brothers. So when I would say that, they would be like, what? I'm like, no, yeah, you asked me what I have in mind. I'm telling you what I have in mind. So that's what it is. So when I met Panayotis Vasilakis, he's a DP, he reads my script and he goes, and never heard me say this. He goes like, this is something like, I see what you're trying to do here. This is something like between Jesus of Nazareth and Coen brothers. And I was like, oh my God, I knew this was the guy to DP, and he really had such a good understanding for what I wanted. We had a fantastic communication. We decided to desaturate the color because the story of Saint Nectarios is not a flowery story. We have to catch the mood with the color. We decided to go with a little bit different aspect ratio, which was 1.66 instead of the regular aspect ratio. Why? This is more what we used like in the old filmmaking, in film noir. What it happens, the screen is more narrow. There's more space above their head. And you're not focused, because I told him I don't want people focusing on the surrounding. I want to go in the head of the character. So that's why we did that. So we can feel what the character feels and go through the story that way. So all of these things were done to emphasize that feeling. So we did some little bit of a film thing that helped for that.
Yeah.
And then we had the fabulous music.
That's great. Yeah, because
and music was amazing. I mean,
you're anticipating all of our questions. Yeah. we definitely wanted to talk to you about because this film obviously has a very distinct visual style, and we wanted to ask you about that. But we also wanted to ask you about the music, and in particular, the composer that you managed to get on this film. Thomas, do you want to take this question?
Yeah, well, Zbigniew Preissner, of course, on this podcast, we've discussed each episode of Kieslowski's Decalogue series. We've discussed each episode individually. So we've spent a lot of time with Decalogue. We did 10 episodes discussing Decalogue. And so we've had a lot of time to hear Zbigniew Preissner's wonderful music in that series. And so this was actually the first thing that I heard about the film that got me interested in like a year and a half ago or something. I want to see this when it comes out because this is a religious movie and they got Zbigniew Preissner to write the score. I didn't know who the actors were at the time or anything. So, how did you end up getting him, and what was the process of working with him like?
This was another, I would say, a miracle because, again, Father Adrianos from Mount Athos, through Lisa Gerard, I don't know how he knows her, but he got hold of Zbigniew Preissner and put us together, put us in touch. And I'm talking to him, send him the script. And first he was a little bit on the fence, like, is this a religious? Because the monks calling him, asking him to do the film, so he doesn't know quite, is this going to be a serious movie? Or so when he read the script and he spoke to me and he realized, okay, I know where you're going with this. It's not just a religious film. It has its own story. And so he said, and he has a house in Rhodes in Greece. He loves Greece, and he always wanted to make a film in Greece. So it just the puzzle was put together, and he decided to do it. And working with him, I've learned so much because he tells me, I work from inside out. And so it's another person who has that kind of, he really goes for the emotion. He's not over the top. He's very subtle, but it really elevates the premise of the scene and the emotion in the scene. And what happened, what was interesting, because of a COVID situation, we filmed the whole film. We took 7 weeks to complete the filming. Principal photography lasted 7 weeks, but we first shot 5 weeks, and we have to make a break of 2 months to bring Mickey Rourke and Sasha Petrov from foreign countries. And at that time, Preissner has flown to Athens, and I edited 2/3 of the film, and he was able to do the music for 2/3 of the film. And this is where this was very helpful for this film because I could feel the rhythm. And he helped me in editing as well. He has so much experience. So he pointed out certain things to me which were extremely valuable. So this really helped out. So I knew the last 2 weeks, I knew what I didn't need, what I needed. And our collaboration really was a gift to me. And he's a great person. And we really got along really well. And he was really passionate about this. And when he saw finally the whole picture, he was very happy with it. He said, he was the one who said, like, this reminds me of Tarkovsky. I said, well, I didn't necessarily watch Tarkovsky. I only saw Andrei Rublev.
Wow.
But it's interesting because Tarkovsky works like that. He's very much from inside out, very personal, so maybe that's where that connection comes, because he's not the only one who said that. As a matter of fact, there is a lady who's writing the whole thesis on my film and Andrei Rublev right now in England. So I don't know what it's going to be 20 pages. I'll be happy to send it to you. It's like but this wasn't my
Wow.
goal. I wasn't trying to imitate anybody, but she says, well, but because you didn't imitate it, that's why it has that vibe. A lot of people try to imitate Tarkovsky, and they don't understand it, because he was after the truth. He was really focusing on the truth. And yes, I've done that from my own training, from my own experience. So maybe there is some resemblance in that sense because of that film approach to some of his films.
Wow. Yeah, well, that's a great compliment. I mean, Andrei Rublev
Yeah,
may
well,
be the best
it
film
can-
ever. So
I'm not even. I'm just going. Okay, great. If it's 1% of that, I'm happy. I'm happy.
yeah,
That's great.
Yelena, so what's next on the docket for this film, or for you, or any future projects or anything? I know you founded that this was produced, as with several of your past works, by Simeon Entertainment, which you founded with your husband. Is there anything that Simeon Entertainment is continuing to work on right now, or anything like that?
Well, one thing I just want to add about this film, it's also, we just got a date for Australia. It's a straight out theatrical distribution. It's coming out on April 16th across the whole Australia.
Right.
So if anybody's listening, they know that. And it's going to be shown in whole Latin America as well. We just still don't have a date, but it's going to be showing there as well. And obviously, ultimately, it's going to end up on the platforms, and everybody will be able to, after its theatrical run, that's the goal. People will be able to access it. The other projects, I have written something as a vehicle to my acting, which I'm not going to, interestingly enough, I'm not interested anymore, because after directing this film, I've gained confidence. I feel like it's something that I really like doing. And this wasn't an easy film to direct. And you know what I'm talking about. With this kind of films, you can really slip. You can fall really easily when you talk about spirituality, and so this required a lot of focus and a lot of effort. So I've wrote a film script called Loveless. It's about the life of Greta Garbo, and because I wrote it, I have a spiritual element to it. I like that. So that's something that I would want to direct after this.
Greta Garbo, the Swedish actress, right?
Yeah, the Swedish, the Swedish actress, yes. So, and I'm gonna get a great actress to play. I'm very happy to be at the director's seat at this point. I really enjoy it. There is another film called Dead Serious that I haven't written, but it was that I'm attached to direct. It deals. Danny Glover is attached. It's not an action movie. It deals with domestic violence. It's something that I feel as a woman I could tackle. And there's a couple of other projects, and there is something in development, something on a saint from a 4th century, which at this point the denomination doesn't, it wouldn't even be a question.
Sure.
It's about a saint from Ethiopia, Saint Moses the Black, the Ethiopian. I'm interested in his
we
story.
know about him.
Yeah.
So I will see if we're going to do a series or movie. I'm working on it right now. I have a good idea of how that could maybe come to fruition, if it's meant to be, God willing. And so those are the things that I'm looking into. And as I can say, you never know which one's going to go first. So whatever it's meant to be.
Wow. Well, you said several times, Yelena, that you direct from the inside out, and I think that that's especially important for a film like this one, Man of God. I don't think you can speak about the spiritual life or the struggle for holiness, or speak truth, but from a place of truth and spiritual seeking.
Yes.
So thank you for writing and directing this film. Thank you for joining us on the show. Congratulations on all of the success that the film has already seen, and we're going to be praying that it sees even more.
Yes, thank you,
so
Yelena.
much. Thank you. My pleasure.
All right. If anybody's watching this, hit that subscribe button. You can also visit us at catholicculture.org and check out our other podcasts. And if you want to support the podcast, go to catholicculture.org/donate/audio. Thanks everyone for listening.